Welcome to Nothing Moves Without Us, a Black culture podcast focused on the past 30 years of Black entertainment, music, television, and media. I'm your host, Clifford.
And I'm Thomas.
Today we'll
And it
be
feels good being Thomas. Welcome back.
today we'll be doing part two of our Family Matters series. We'll be discussing seasons 2 through 8. What's up, man? Glad to be back. Um, how has your watching been these past few weeks?
Rod, to be honest, man, it's been incredible. I've with based on how we've looked at kind of the first season, I was even more excited to watch the other season. So it's been really, really cool. It's been really incredible.
It's I finally watched the first season and just reconnecting it to the first time we initially spoke, and it's kind of seeing a transition and getting like the wake up call. Um, I guess in terms of how I just view the series, in terms of like what we said about thinking that they were well off, thinking that things felt a lot more happier and established than they really were. And it's a bunch of this new perspectives and shifts and frustrations and a lot of the same laughs that I remember growing up also. So excited to talk about it more and go through all the all the layers of this like multifaceted show. The laughs, the frustrations, the creepiness, the the symbolism. It's weird, man. It was really weird just going through all the episodes as an adult and just like just being uncomfortable with like we talked about the Steve mostly in the last episode and just his behavior, like even Laura, just her. I know we'll jump into like Stefan at some point, but just seeing a dynamic shift, seeing how Steve was treated, and just
Yeah.
really trying to understand and connect with his character, man.
So I like where you're going. I like where we're starting off at. I would love to kind of dive in on last episode we talked a lot about the first season and kind of what I saw. What were your thoughts after checking out the first season? And just obviously a quick recap because we're going to dive into the other seasons. But
Right.
you didn't get a chance to watch it in its entirety
Yeah,
last time.
yeah.
So
I mean, I feel like it. The show felt more wholesome initially. Like it really felt like it was about family and the struggles of a family, and it's kind of going through the trials and tribulations. And I felt more connected to it within the first season. And as I went on, it was most like I said, it was mostly just laughs, and here and there they'd have those like powerful episodes. And I guess overall, what we talked about, like family matters. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, family's going to stick together. Family's going to work on it. So having that realization in the first episode always kind of brought me back to that. Like no matter what was going on throughout the rest of the seasons, I just kind of honed in on the first season and the importance that it's just family is the focus. As long as you communicate, have dialogue, apologize for things, and try to move forward, that's all that really matters.
yeah, for sure. It's so interesting. You got to tell me too for yourself seeing it after we've had that conversation and seeing the characters and their development differently than what you would see when when you were watching it when you were younger or watching it growing up. So, I guess what was the biggest thing that stood out?
In the first season, or throughout the whole first 8 seasons.
I would say the first season, and then we can transition into how it start. What you saw differently going into the other seasons.
I guess the first season, I'll stick with what I said about the feeling of this family and connectiveness. I guess being connected, and it felt the first season felt less comical. Although they had jokes here and there, it really felt like it was about the struggle and the experiences and just trying to work through the challenges of life. And yeah, I think that's really it. it felt more family oriented and family connected. Steve is kind of just that annoying neighbor who intrudes and who inputs himself. And initially, it feels like he has good intentions, but he causes like a lot of rift in the family because Laura's hard on him, Carl is hard on him. Eddie gets frustrated with him sometimes, but the grandmother loves him, Harriet loves him. So I feel like Steve is like this divisive character who kind of splits the family. Um, I guess really like in that first season, and I guess transitioning, he becomes part of the family, right? He becomes part of the family that matters.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting you say that because yes, first season was very wholesome, and as you look at the seasons and kind of how they start developing their episodes and what the episodes look like, you find that a lot of times it goes away from or they move away from just that wholesomeness to start jumping into like really deep issues or really
Right, right,
challenging things happening in those times. And I don't know how many episodes you had an opportunity to check out between the season 2 and 8. I watched about 9 or 10. I try to go two or three uh, 2 or 3 episodes per season, but that
yeah. I
wasn't
did about the
happening. So
same.
I was like, let me just do maybe one and one and a half.
It's a lot,
So
yo.
I had an
It's a
opportunity
lot.
to
It's a
watch
lot.
from, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So I feel like season 2, it was still that wholesomeness. There was a lot that was kind of happening you started to see the character development of Steve, right? You started to see the producers or writers really focus on bringing his character to life.
Right.
Whereas in season 1, he was just kind of an add-on.
Right. 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 Right.
So that was definitely something that I noticed as I continue to watch it and beyond.
Yeah, I think that was he wasn't I was online and I just like pulled up an article of like Family Matters. I guess 2 weeks ago he said that the cast members didn't initially welcome him because
Oh,
they had
really?
a pilot. Huh? Say it again.
No, I said really. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
wow. I didn't know that.
yeah. They had the pilot, they had the wholesome family show concept, and he was just supposed to be this add-on, like one and done thing. He said, but whatever whoever he was, it worked. People loved the comic relief, and then he quickly became the star. Like you look at the posters of the show, and you see him in the front, and it's like the family in the background, right? So I get it. Like as an actor, as a and I want to say that actors from like the 90s, 80s were more well trained, right? Like there's a craft, you come to the job through like years of like education and you want to put your all into it. And then, someone, they just shift the entire dynamic of the show. Now it's just a comedy show. And now you kind of feel like you're outshined. So I'd feel away. I get it. But as the seasons develop, we see growth like on everyone's part. You see the connectiveness and you see the stories evolve. It was interesting for me in season 2 that they brought cousin Urkel, like episode 8 season 2, cousin Urkel. And I watched it and I'm like, he's like a young kid, right? He's like in his teens and they already have him dressing up as a girl. And it felt, it just felt weird. Like, it felt like that ever-present theme of demasculating black men, and especially having it done to a child, a teen. Like it felt off-putting. So especially so early on when he was just like really being introduced into the show.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that because season 2, the episodes I chose to watch was the episode where he introduces us to the Urkel dance. Um,
I didn't see that.
and I just remember you never remember do the Urkel
I
to the
remember the
Urkel.
episode, but I didn't watch that. Yeah. I remember.
It, so I watched the episode and there were a lot of things that just stood out to me, like uh Lorenz Tate is in the episode. So Lorenz Tate is like this young troublemaker. Um, and he kind of the basis of the episode is Maxine is having a party and Lorenz Tate is spiking the drinks and Steve gets drunk and he does this whole dance and he ends up on the roof and there's just a lot of that happening. But the reason I bring it up is because I watching that, and to me that was like my first dive into Steve pre or post season one.
Right.
He has like a supreme confidence to me. Steve Urkel, like
Yo,
no matter what people say to him, no matter how people treat him, he has a supreme confidence. Nothing can break him. And Lorenz Tate like comes for him, and when he comes for him, Steve literally like attacks him right back. Like, bro,
right.
like who you talking to? He's like, you came up with that all by yourself. Like, and I realized as I continue to watch the show, no matter what, Steve always has supreme
Right, right,
confidence.
right,
So
right,
I give
right,
him
right.
that.
And real quick, just to reference it,
I
that
give him
was
that.
episode 18, Life of the Party, in season two. So I'll jump back to season one real
Yeah,
quick. So the what was it? Episode 19, in a jam, where Bull the bully is like harassing Steve and trying to take his money. That was like the first time for me that's like the first real immersive episode of Steve. And you see him being bullied, you see him being hurt, and he's like, no, like I'm not giving you money. He's scared, he's timid about it, but he voices, and he like you said, he has that confidence, and he takes his stand. And you see it throughout the rest of the show. At every point, like, he does not bend or break for anyone, um, which is dope. And I look at it also in terms of himself, his value, and how he allows people to treat him, but also thinking about it as like the determination in him winning Laura, right? Like I feel like the first maybe 3 or 4 seasons was
yeah,
like, all
word.
right, I'm gonna keep going at it. I believe, I believe, I believe, and then eventually he meets Myra, but he still he wants what he wants, and throughout it all, like to your point, man, he has this confidence that rounds out his character. As annoying as he may be, as I watch him and he does things, I'm like, yo, this dude is mad annoying. But it's funny. But the confidence
Yeah,
throughout it all is what really sets him apart. Yeah, and I think it offers that good balance and perspective of being the nerdy, annoying person, but still believing in yourself, still not allowing yourself to get walked over by people, except for Laura.
yeah, Laura, she was no joke, and she used to straight disrespect him. And I literally wrote down quotes where she would say stuff to him, and it was super super disrespectful. But he
Right,
just took it like a man. He just was like, yo, it is what it is. Um, and then another thing about Steve, I think that we miss is that I don't feel like Steve. I feel like Steve knows exactly what's going on, but he acts oblivious to some things. And when he needs to step up and be that guy to either put somebody on their place or educate someone, then we see it. Not only we see his confidence, but we see him become true to himself.
right.
And it's just really really dope to watch. I think after watching season one and how Eddie and Carl's relationship was, and I shared it in the last episode, just how like crappy Carl got treated and Eddie got treated. To watch Steve get treated a certain way and still have this confidence and even at times let his truth speak for itself, it's definitely a breath of fresh air as I continue to watch the series.
It, the more I watched, the more I realized that all the men outside of Steve were treated poorly. Right? Eddie was just a cliche dumb jock. Carl was like a fierce, fierce, fierce police officer. But at home, he was just like, he can't do this, can't do that. And maybe it's tied into like them struggling with money. Maybe they didn't respect him because he didn't have a high paying job at times. Waldo came in. Waldo was, he was worse off than Eddie was. And Steve, again, as his character was, he was still the um I guess he was the I want to say like the alpha male of the show, right? He was the most confident man in the show. He was the most he was the smartest man on the show. He was the, or I guess, male on the show, the most creative, the genius behind it. And like, to me, it offers this nice dynamic of, again, like, although he's the cliche nerd, the values and the way he exists and lives in terms of honoring himself, like you said, that's all that really mattered. And I wonder if that's part of it, right? Like, you have the cliche tall, Eddie's a big, tall, buff guy, and Steve's like, scrawny, but all Eddie had going for him was his looks and his sport skills. But Steve, although like the social pariah, he had the full scope of just understanding himself, valuing himself, and just wanting more from life. Um, I think that's what really matters, right? Like that's what we all should want for ourselves: to honor ourselves, do what we need to do for ourselves, find our passions and hobby, create, and chase our dreams. And Steve continually did that, episode after episode, because the confidence was always there.
Yeah, it's funny you see that as all the men were being essentially called out, and Steve was the alpha male, because I see it a little bit different. I actually think that the main characters were always called out, but then anybody that was a guest would get crazy love. Any guest male would get, the women would be the
Right, right,
nicest
right, right,
to him. It could be like a guy Laura's dating, or it can be, one of Carl's partners, or like
right,
the any male that came in from as a guest for an episode, he was always treated with mad love. They were showing mad respect, and it's just mad weird to me. And obviously, the show is the writers of the show probably did that on purpose, but it's something that I noticed, because I really thought that there are times where Eddie has new friends and come into the picture, and Laura's like smitten over that person, um, or there's different basketball players that are in episodes, and they're
right.
just all their energy is just always so excited. The family's like, oh, this person's so cool and they're incredible. Um, and then another thing about Steve that's just mind blowing to me is that, and I don't know what made the writers do this, but Steve being someone who loves yodeling, that was weird to me. I was like, where did he? Who taught? Like, whose idea was this? This guy
Right,
loves
right,
to
right, right,
yodel,
right,
uh, and he just that's just something he loves to do, and he's like listening to a hip hop yodel track
right,
and
right, right,
just
right,
different
right,
things like that. I thought it just hilarious to me how they gave Steve this. They made him the most unique like character ever, and I'm just wondering how they had these conversations. Like, what did it look like in their meetings? Like, hey, you know what? We're gonna have Steve, you know, literally yodel around, and we're gonna give him an accordion. Like, where did that come from? Of all the
right.
instruments, they gave him an accordion. Uh,
It,
like it just things like that. It's very interesting to me.
yeah. I mean, I hope we like in a final episode, when we do like the last episode recap and the review recap, we'll get some more answers about his character development from like behind the scenes. But I want to I want to say, like, I think it's just part of like how, on one aspect, right? How do we show him as being the cliche, like, again, the cliche nerd, the cliche person that society doesn't think is cool, but we present all these unique passions and love, like the yodeling. Like, I mean, the episode where he was sleepwalking, like he had
Yep.
suspenders on his pajamas, like for what? Like, there's all these like small things written in that are just so, they seem so far fetched. Like, again, like you said, the accordion and the yodeling, but it's just like, why not, right? Like, why not? Why not have him just do the most extreme things you would never expect him to do? Number one, as a black kid, um, well, I guess mostly that. And I guess that maybe as a black kid, right? I've never seen a black person play the accordion. I've never seen a black person yodel. And granted, it's TV,
Never.
but yeah, but like, why not, right? Like, why not just have him? Why not? Like, And like, what are the other characters' passions? Like, what does anyone else really love to do on a regular basis? And for Steve, he just has these unlit like it's always something. He's always creating something. He always has a new idea. He always
Yep.
like there was a episode where he had like a wedge of cheese, and he's like, one day a entire city will be powered by a wedge of cheese, and it's comical, it's funny, but the inspiration behind it is just like, yo, this kid can do anything he wants, anything he puts his mind to. He's free. That's what it really is, right? Like I think he's the most free out of all the characters outside of like maybe the grandmother because she's older and she doesn't really care about anything. He doesn't have any limits in terms of what he's willing to learn, what he's willing to do, and if he sees something that he wants, he's gonna go after it and he's gonna excel at it. And I think that's yeah, I think that for me that's like the bigger picture behind it. Like, whatever you want to do, man, just do it, own it, and enjoy it. Yeah,
Yeah. So let's pause there because I think you bring up a great point around who Steve was as an individual. So I would love to raise the question, and this is for you and I to think about: how is Steve's character? Uh, how does it relate to where we are today? You know, in today's world, a person like Steve, how would he be perceived? Um, because we live in an age now where being an individual and individuality is something that's huge. It's pushed, right? When it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to following your passions. You have all these people out here who do all these, put out these books, who do podcasts, who just do all these different things that
right.
highlight individuality and being free. And there's all these different isms and there's just all these different things out there. So how do you feel Steve would relate, or how a character like Steve uh, would fare in this times in 2021?
I think he's part of the prototype of what a lot of Black people have become. I think
Mm.
we're 80s and 90s babies. We grew up with conditioning of this hip hop, everything being hip hop focused. And if hip hop is very linear in terms of just like the monolithic thinking and behavior and perspective. And although there's different aspects to it on a media front, a singular message is what's portrayed. But I think even me growing up,
Yeah.
like in the '90s, and I could I would assume the same for you. You see an emergence of diversity in terms of culture. Like I grew up watching anime. Like that's not that's not traditional, but it's something that I loved, and a lot of Black kids love anime. So you see the different subreddit groups, you see the different Facebook groups, you see the Twitter groups. There's an emergence of, like you said, individuality, an emergence of creativity, and just putting your passions out there and being yourself. Like people say, unapologetically Black, right? Steve's the foundation for that in a sense. And granted, he never made
He
it.
is the founder.
Right? He's the founder. He's the founder, the president. What's the hair club for men thing, and a customer. Um, yeah. Although I don't think he's ever really, from the episodes I've watched, he's never really made it race based. But the conditioning and seeing that, I want to say that seeing that as a child, seeing this Black kid just do whatever he wants to do, be an inventor, be a genius. It's inspiring, and I think a lot of us growing up watching these shows, it's signaling and telling us that we can be more. And I think that's part of the podcast, right? This is part of what we're doing is looking back at the shows that have influenced us and finding the subtle and subconscious cues that they've kind of expressed. So, yeah. What do
Yeah, I
you
agree with you
how do you think
100%.
he would fare?
Yeah, I think Steve is it's like I think he's typical uh like the typical guy that everybody didn't want to be in
Right.
in earlier years. But today we get so much love. People will be copying him. They'll be literally following him around. They would. I really could see him, you know, being on Capitol Hill, talking about yodeling's important. Like he just has that personality, and
Right, right.
there was a level of respect that he commanded without even doing it, just by him living this carefree, I'm me, and I'm unapologetic about it. And you bring up a great point about him being unapologetically black, right? Um, because I do see that, and I watched one of the episodes of season, I think it was season two, where and I'll confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it was season two where Laura wanted to create a Black History class in our school, and she went to the school principal and she's like, "Hey, I want to create this Black History class." That episode was weird too because there was two teachers. One was her history teacher, who was a white woman, and the principal of the school was, I believe, Japanese. So uh, it was just really interesting to have those dynamics. Um, but yeah, episode, it was episode 20, fight the good fight, in season two. And the reason I bring it up is because Steve was, he loves Laura, but he was like, "Yo, I'm gonna help you build this," and he ended up getting. They had a whole thing where they had people sign a petition, and he got tons of people to sign his petition to start this Black History course in their school, and he just was super about it. And even then, like there's a part in the episode where he goes to the basketball team and he's like, "Hey guys, I need you guys to sign this," and they're like giving him shit, and then he explains to them like, this is the reason I want you to sign this. And then they actually like switch quickly and they're like, "Steve, whatever you need, bro, I got you, whatever you need."
He
And
was
it's
the
just
first woke. He
so
was
interesting to
woke.
see that
He was the,
dynamic. And
he's the prototype
he,
for being
super
woke
woke,
and
right?
unapologetically black.
It was,
Like,
we need a statue of Steve Urkel somewhere, bro, because I I I really believe that there's a lot that we probably didn't take away from then, that I definitely saw now. And there are other things in the episode that are that are interesting to me. And I won't go too much off Steve, but in that same episode, there was a history book they were looking at and they were reading. Laura was explaining and sharing some of the history she learned with her parents and her grandmother. And on the book, it actually said, which I don't know how this got away. They got away with this, but on the book, it actually said "Great Negroes." The name of the book, the title was "Great Negroes, Past and Present,"
that's probably
which I
all they
thought
had back then, right?
was kind of
Like
crazy for this
that's probably the first
in
of
the
its kind back then.
'90s.
That's
Right in the
crazy.
'90s, I was like, man, the '90s, they still on that. But if you watch the episode, you actually see that is the title of the book. It actually says "Great Negroes, Past and Present," which is like, it just blew my mind. I had to rewind it and watch it a couple of times because I
Right,
thought I
right.
was bugging. Um, and then just noticing that Steve has so many underlying skills. Like Steve could hoop. He was a hooper. Like
Yo,
watching him dribble, and I was blown away. I was like, he got skills. Like Steve could be
right,
on a
right, right.
basketball team, but he doesn't want to be that guy. That's not him. So yeah, man, I think in today's world, Steve would really stand out, and it would be appreciated. He would be way more appreciated now than he was then.
Yeah, I guess like I totally forgot about the basketball. I guess it ties into what's the phrase? Not like a idiot savant. I forgot the phrase, but anything he anything he wants to learn, he's gonna master it. Like that's his only level, right? Like he doesn't do anything mediocre. If he's gonna learn something, he's gonna do it to the highest level. And again, I think that like that's the standard we should all be achieving for, right? I think that's the standard we're all trying to achieve. I kind of wanted to transition into Laura since you brought up the Laura episode and this just like their dynamic, man. I feel sorry
Yeah,
for Steve, yo. Like for real, like just watching the episodes, I just continuously just feel sorry for him. His parents don't fuck with him. Um, it's just sad, man. Like there was a episode, like he was talking about his parents, and like his parents gave him a anchovy paste dog biscuit for like dinner or something like that. And I'm like, how, like, like how do you write like how do you just insert this like child abuse and child neglect into the conversation like it's nothing,
Yep.
right? Um, his parents were ashamed of him, right? I think his parents were nerds also. And there was an episode where he talked about his parents like being ashamed of him and not wanting him around the house because I think the family was over or they had guests over. And it's like from every angle, it's just like, yo, he just keeps getting shitted on, keeps getting shitted on. And I guess going back to the confidence aspect, like where does it come from, right? Like if that's your if at
Great
home you
question.
just right if at home you're just treated poorly all the time, like maybe it's just a defense mechanism and maybe it's essential and good, but how do you get to that point where like no one really sees you for who you are, but it doesn't matter. And with Laura, like I end up just I, I hated Laura. I hate Laura's character. I hate her character. I think she's corny, man. I think her character is corny, and especially when Stefan comes out and just seeing her automatic switch in demeanor. And I watched it and I was like, you know what? She's desert thirsty. She's desert thirsty over Stefan. Um, and you see what she gets away with, right? Like
Word.
as a male, Steve can't just jump up on her and kiss her, throw himself on her, but she can do that to Stefan whenever she wants, and it was frustrating, man. It was really just like we talked about in the first episode. What is it teaching people? Like, what is it conditioning people to believe? You have the nerd who's skilled, intelligent, you know, loves everyone, has love for everyone, but he doesn't get the girl. The cool, hip, jerk guy is the one who gets the girl, right? Which is kind of the standard, and I think also kind of the stereotypical cliche when it comes to black men, black relationships and black dating, right? That women don't want the stand up guy. That they want the thug, or they want the guy who's going to be arrogant, who's not going to treat them right. And it got so bad to the point where Stefan had to go because no one wanted him around because he was so obsessed with himself. Um, and then seeing, I think that the last episode of season 5, I believe it was. Let me just check real quick. When Stefan returns, and yeah, and he's like more balanced out, and Laura's like, yeah, he's too nice. Like, I don't like it. He's too caring. He's too sweet. Um, I don't know. What were your feelings
Yeah,
like seeing Laura and Steve's relationship develop over the seasons?
bro. It's such a great question because I think back in those times, I always thought Laura was the baddest chick. Like I was like, I want to
Right,
be with Laura. I want Laura.
right, right.
And thinking about it now, I'm like, Laura. In no disrespect, but Laura was a bitch.
Yeah,
She was a
yeah,
bitch.
yeah.
She treated Steve like literally like shit. Um, and I actually like wrote down some quotes as I was watching shows. So you talked about season 5, but I'm gonna go back to when Steve actually met when he ended up meeting Myra the first, and that was actually in season 4. So that was season 4. The episode was I don't know the exact number, but it was early in the season. Um, when he meets Myra for the first time, they set the guy that Laura's dating set Steve up with his cousin, and that's when he meets Myra and appreciate it. So season 4, episode 15. Um, and it's just interesting because the whole episode, Steve and Myra are hitting it off. Like from the moment they meet, they're hitting it off. They're really into each other. They're feeling each other. And then right at the end of the episode, Steve like stops everything. They had a concert. Steve's like, "Listen," stops the music. He gets up, and I'm thinking he's about to proclaim his love for Myra, and he doubles down on Laura. He's like, "Yo, I just made a mistake having emotions for this woman. I love you, Laura." Like it was just mind blowing to me. Like this fool, what's wrong with this guy? But he really like believed that Laura was the love of his life. I mean, I just thought it to be how it just was interesting to see how Myra and Steve had this. this dynamic where they connected not only from an intellectual level, but they were physically attracted to each other. And Steve
Right,
kept saying
right,
that. He kept saying to Laura, he's like, yeah, he's like, Myra is so cool, but I like her, but I'm
right,
attracted to her. He's like, you know, normally he didn't feel these feelings. So I just thought that was crazy. And then even in some later episodes, like I said, I wrote down quotes where Steve is like, yo, telling Laura, hey, I really dig Myra, and Laura's like, it's like Beauty and the Beast. She's calling him a
right, right,
beast, and uh, she just keeps making him seem like he's nothing, but at the same time, she's like, get away from me. And then you're absolutely right. When Stefan gets in the picture and the roles reverse, even the episode you're talking about, season 5, episode 24, when the last episode when Stefan returns, Laura literally begs Steve to create Stefan again. She's like, please, like make another Stefan. Um, and it
like
just
why couldn't
crazy
she
to me
find another
how.
man? Like, right? Why couldn't she find another man?
So it's
Like, how, right?
so this is funny because at the
I'm sorry
beginning
to
of the
cut you
episode, I
off.
don't know if you remember. That's all good. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the episode, the same exact episode, Laura is doing Maxine's hair, and Maxine is dating Waldo. She's about to go on a date with Waldo or meet Waldo's family. And Maxine's like, Laura, you're always by yourself. Like, you're mad because you're always by yourself. And Laura's like, no, I'm not. And Maxine's like, no, but you totally are. Like, you're always by, like, it's basically calling her out, saying like she can't keep a guy. And then Maxine's the one that tells Laura like, yo, you should talk to Steve about bringing back Stefan, because Stefan was a dick before, but maybe he can make him different. And
Right,
that's
right,
how that
right.
conversation goes. Um, so yeah, just very the Laura dynamic is, she gets on my nerves. But I will say, and this is a little off topic, but I will say, when Laura cut her hair, when she had that short hair look, yo, she was fine as hell, bro.
Yo,
I ain't care what she
yo,
said to Steve.
I had
She was fine.
flashbacks in childhood. I had flashbacks thinking about childhood. Like, yo, like you said, she was bad. She was the one. I get it. I get it, Steve. I get it. I get it. Um,
Yeah, he did the
real,
right
real,
thing, man. But that short hair, Laura, woo, bad.
I like that you brought up Maxine and Waldo real quick. I love their dynamic, and like I feel like they're short blip to talk about, but I really love their dynamic, and I love that anyone can find love, right? Like they're both kind of not not up, not as much. They don't have too much up there, but they were able to find each other and be happy and be good, which is dope. But again, you think about the main family, right? Eddie never really had a consistent girlfriend. Laura, I can't remember her dating. Again, granted, we went through episode. I don't remember her ever dating someone consistently. So like, what's her problem, right? Like, why? And even before Stefan even existed, what was her problem? What was her problem? Why couldn't she find someone after the fact either? Now I'm thinking. So I've been watching Martin also, and for some reason I'm making the connection of I so like Maxine, light skin, had Waldo, right? I'm thinking about Martin, Gina, light skin
Yep,
had Martin, Pam never had a man. I'm thinking about
yep,
um what's her name? I think Maxine from Living Single never really had a man. I feel like there's some, it may be some unwritten or I guess unwritten character development or character description when it comes to like dark skinned women rarely having like consistent spouses in TV shows. That's what that made me think of when you brought up Maxine. For some reason, I made that connection, and maybe it's just a
yeah.
main character thing,
That's a
right?
great point.
Yeah, sorry.
That's a great point. That's a great point because I think Laura, not only was she was dark skinned, but also she was kind of masculine, right? She was kind of tough. She didn't dress like a tomboy, but she was
Right.
tough, like a guy. I could see a guy having trouble dealing with her because of her not taking any shit. She doesn't take any flack for anybody except her dad. Her dad, she had this really sweet, kind of innocent relationship with Carl, and she used to take advantage of Carl and tell him to his face. Like I was saying in the last episode, she'll
Right.
tell him, she'll be like, "Dad, can you get me to help me go to this party? Mom said I can't go," and he'll be like, "Baby, don't worry about it." And then later on in the episode, she'll be like, "I conned you." And it
You're
was just
right,
stuff like that.
yo,
I just
mad disrespectful, mad
like, yo, this girl
disrespectful.
has. So I think being the dark skin women in TV at that time probably were looked at a certain way, as well as being more, I don't want to say masculine, but just being no nonsense. That was something
Right,
that I feel like Laura carried even when she was in middle school, when in season one, and
right.
as she continued to develop as a character. So yeah.
And maybe that's part of the dynamic, right? Like you look at Carl, you look at how he was treated by Harriet. So Steve would be like, I guess, understanding her father, understanding she can manipulate him. She doesn't really want that. She wants a more alpha male who's gonna like put her clichely put her in a place, or kind of lead her and guide her, maybe. And maybe that's the dynamic that I brought up earlier, with Stefan being the jerk, but he's confident, he's good looking, and that's all that matters. And Steve just being too, I guess, too emotional, too beta, and that just not really being what she wanted. Yeah, a lot. That's it's a weird connection to think about. And granted, maybe that's not what it is specifically, but it feels like it's part of the experience and the general narrative when it comes to black relationships, or I guess male and woman dynamics also.
Yeah, and even with that, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit because you brought up Maxine and Waldo. I noticed, and I don't know if you noticed it, but I believe it was probably season four, so either the beginning of season four or season five, when Waldo started showing up in the intro. So his
Right, right, right.
character was in the intro. Maxine wasn't in the intro. Weasel was a regular. He used to crack me up, bro. Like the way I literally wrote down on my notes, why does he talk like that? Because
It was funny
he
when I
just
first saw him.
he was literally
I
a
thought it was
weasel.
Kevin Hart. When I first saw him, I thought, yeah, Kevin Hart.
Oh man, that guy's crazy. But I was mind blown by they put Waldo in the intro, so obviously he was going to be more of a character. Obviously they added Steve, so you had Waldo and Steve in the intro. Judy was nowhere to be found. I think after season five or six, they took her out the intro, so her character development went out the window. You never seen her do anything other than
I don't think did her
maybe little
character
little segments
development
here and there. But
ever start. I mean, I feel like out of all the episodes I've watched, she maybe said one line, and it was with Richie. Like, and even thinking about her, or watching the show consistently as a kid, I don't remember her speaking. I don't remember her speaking at all. She just existed. I feel like in a family.
yeah, well, in season one, her and Laura were like tit for tat. Every time Laura said something, she would
Right.
co-sign it, and vice versa.
And
Um,
maybe Steve
as the
replaced
seasons
her.
went on, you notice. I don't even think Steve replaced her. I just think that they felt like the Winslows didn't need three children, um, and it was interesting because they never like said Judy like went to live with her aunt, or she just like disappeared. She just was gone. Like it would have been nice if they had an episode and maybe Judy. I hate to say it, but maybe Judy got sick or
Right,
something
right, right,
happened.
right,
Like Judy went to go live with her uncle, but she just disappeared. And then Rachel also wasn't in her appearances started to kind of slow down as well. But
right.
Richie was great, man. Richie was so smart. Richie actually reminds me of a Steve. He had like as his little 5, 6, 7 year old, he had extreme confidence.
Right, right, right,
Um, and even when he's like helping Carl fix stuff and he's talking to Steve about stuff, there was just so much. There's so much there, and him and Steve are definitely my two favorite characters, hands down. They're I just love how their dynamic was.
Right. I love the grandmother, man. She's whoever wrote for her, or whether she ad libbed or just kind of went with the flow, man. Her jokes were hilarious. Like she was always on point. She always had the good zingers. Like I said, she's carefree. She's retired. She's free. She's supported. She's loved. Like I remember in the first season episode where Laura sold her quilt. Not the first episode. For the first season, there was an
Yep,
episode where Laura sold the family's quilt, and it was just like this tight emotional bond. You felt, and I feel like those were one of the few episodes that I remember of like her like really showing emotion and pain, because the rest of the show, like I said, it kind of feels like this nice comical relief. Um, in season 4, episode 19, I forgot that she got married. I forgot all about Fletcher. I forgot about like
yep,
I saw that, and again when I talked about in the first episode, thinking about modern shows. And again, I don't really watch a lot of the modern black shows, but Blackish is a show that I've really watched before. And comparing Family Matters, grandmother living at home, great personality, fun, her getting married, you seeing an episode where older people finding love and how powerful that is in terms of just
yep.
like it's never too late, right? It's never too late to find love. There's always opportunity to kind of look forward. And thinking about Blackish and thinking about the grandparents there, and it's Lawrence Fishburne, and I forget the grandmother, but they hate each other. They're always fighting, they're always arguing, they're always like snapping at each other, and I'm like, it's funny, but I want lovable old people. I don't want miserable, angry old people. Like that's not what old age is supposed to be. So I like seeing the wedding episode. Like really gave me this extra, I guess this additional like connection and appreciation for the grandmother and her role, and just her always being present, her always being supportive, and her just always kind of being honest and being the fair, balanced one, because that's what a grandmother is supposed to be in a family.
Yeah, she definitely was a character that brought a level of maturity to the show, and she knew how to do it when it was needed. That cool episode was super powerful. I remember getting emotional um, watching it because I do agree. I think just her connection to Laura and having sitting down having a conversation with her, I thought it was dope. It's funny because she didn't have those similar conversations with Eddie. Eddie
Right.
always had those conversations with Carl, always. Um, so you know, she would have those conversations with Rachel, with Carl, with Harriet, but Eddie Eddie just was kind of left out. Like every now her and Eddie had like a comical relationship. Like
Right.
they
Right.
walk past
It
each
was, it
other
was
and they
more
high
cool and
five each other
hip. Yeah,
type
like
shit.
he Eddie kept her young
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I think to your point when it comes to seeing grandparents, she was just a great example of what a grandparent is. Like you know, it happens where you may lose your partner, but life isn't over. She
Right.
found she was able to redefine who she was and find love. And I do agree. I think that's beautiful to see, and especially in the show that has so many different things going on and characters. It's great to see that happen to her. So I definitely agree.
Were there any other powerful episodes that stood out to you, like really heartwarming or emotional?
Yeah. So an episode that like really kind of like got me it brought me back to my childhood was the one with Grandma Ma. Um, and for those of you guys
Oh,
who don't know,
oh.
Grandma Ma was played by Larry Johnson of the
Right,
Charlotte
right,
Hornets back then. Um, that episode, I believe that episode was in season 2 as well, or I might be wrong. No, season 5. I'm sorry. Episode was in season 5, and Eddie and Steve signed up to do this like 2-on-2 tournament, and Eddie had an opportunity to play with like this popular player. So he just first he agrees to play with Steve, and then he leaves Steve to go play with this popular player. And then to your point, this is a perfect example about Grandma Winslow, Mother Winslow, because she introduces Steve to this elderly woman, who can play basketball. And Steve is like, wait, what? Elderly woman could play basketball. And even he's a little like, huh? But then when he meets Grandmama, he's like, oh, let's
Right,
do this.
right.
Um, so that episode just brought me back. And the best part of the episode is the end with Steve and Eddie play 1-on-1 for the tournament, and Steve dunks on Eddie, like he yams it on Eddie. he crosses him and like goes straight to the basket, one hand dunk, and it looks so easy. You could tell it wasn't like photoshopped, or not, I guess you can't Photoshop, but there
Right.
was no camera enhancements. He literally dunked on Eddie. Uh, that was something that it just blew my mind. And then at the end of the episode, him and Eddie make up, and it just was real wholesome how they made up. So, but seeing Larry Johnson, I'm a big basketball fan. So growing up, I loved uh, anything basketball, and to see him as a character on the show, and even some of his lines he was saying, it just was hilarious. So that's definitely one that stood out to me.
Yeah, I completely forgot about the Grandmama episode. I'm gonna go watch that and look for that. Yeah.
And
It's
let me add this.
yeah.
Let me add this. So a thing that came to my mind when I was watching it is that and you talked about it. Steve wore a dress early in earlier seasons, and what did this team, these writers, this producers, have to tell Larry Johnson to get him to wear a dress? And when I was watching the episode, I was like, this dynamic again of these dudes these dudes wearing
Right.
dresses, like I get it. It was cool, and it was a cool kind of idea. But how cool would it have been if it was a WNBA player, right? And I don't think the WNBA was established by then. I think it came later
Right.
in the '90s. But it or a taller woman that plays basketball. So it was just very what led them to create a character using a real life professional athlete and put him in a dress. I wonder how Larry Johnson felt about that and
But I
what that
thought
looked like.
Grandmama existed before that. Like that was his own personal character even before that, right?
You might be right. I don't know the history before. If that's the case, then
Yeah.
everything I said
Grandma.
is pointless. So I take it back.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think Grandmama was like his own character that he created. Like he had a bunch of commercials for his sneakers. I think he had maybe Reeboks. I don't remember. Maybe I'll look it up. But yeah, Grandmama existed beforehand. So I mean, maybe it was just a connection. Like again, like giving Estelle, showing it a different side of Estelle, and showing, um, like I guess the theme. Excuse me. The theme with Steve is that looks can be deceiving, right? Like just because Steve is a nerd doesn't mean he can't ball, right? Doesn't mean, like you said, doesn't mean he's not going to yam it on you, right? And just because you see an elderly woman doesn't mean they can't play ball. And granted, you know who it is, right? Like it's a man in a dress, but it's just, I think it's just the the signaling or the conditioning or the, I guess, the message, right? Like looks can be deceiving, and I think that's kind of that should be the real takeaway from it at times. But like going back to the dress aspect, and cousin Urkel, and there's another episode with cousin Urkel, I think in season 6 or 7. It's I'm thinking about like Tyler Perry, right? Thinking about the standard of putting black men in dresses. Not putting them. I guess for Steve's character, he was placed in it, or maybe that was scripted in. But prior to that, I mean, it's part of black media, black culture, I guess, right? You think about Martin, you think about Shanae, you think about Big Mama's House, Eddie Murphy and the Clumps. Like there's a long-standing history of black men wearing dresses and being female characters for whatever the reason is, versus just like to your point, let's hire a woman, hire a black woman to do it. Like give black women jobs too, right? I think that, yeah, I like that. Like why
yeah,
not just? find a black woman who can bowl and give her the job. But guest appearances, it makes it more exciting. Maybe Grandmama and Larry Johnson had like a new sneaker deal coming out, so it makes more sense to kind of integrate and have someone who has something to promote, but can also just kind of boost your ratings to get people excited.
Yeah, so as you were saying, I looked it up, and you're absolutely right. It was they created Grandmama based on a series of commercials with Converse,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's
Converse.
interesting reading about it. It was supposed to be uh, set with Larry Johnson, uh, Larry Bird, and then Magic Johnson in other commercials, Converse commercials, but those two end up not doing it. And they would have played mad scientists, which is pretty funny to create Grandmama.
Right, right, right.
So uh, yeah, you're absolutely right. But even with that being the case, I still think that uh, the dynamic of I just it would have been nice to your point to see a female professional athlete, get an opportunity, or I think it's only fair if if they had other characters that even I don't want to say women dressing as men, but just other dynamics that added to it. There were a lot of episodes where they did like they went to the old west, or they went back in
Right,
time, or
right,
they
right,
they did
right.
all these different these unique concepts, and it just would have been cool to kind of see that. Even the episode where Carl, and I can't remember what episode it was, but Carl like has a dream that Laura and Steve
Steve
switch,
Kim.
and Laura's the it's like Laura Urkel and
I didn't see that.
um
Damn.
and yeah, there's an episode where they switch where Laura actually dresses essentially like Steve, and she's trying to get at as Steve as the popular guy or the normal guy,
Right, right, right.
and it's a dream that Carl has. So, those things are cool, but overall, I just think that uh, the show itself took a lot of risk, and hopefully those risks, for me, those risks paid off, but they clearly did because they did 9 seasons. So
Right.
it was cool to see.
Right, right. So what I was thinking about, I thought about Stefan real quick and kind of, I guess, tying back into him, but also just thinking about Jaleel White's acting skills. So, like the first time he transformed into Stefan, there's like this instant of just character change, right? Like Steve is like this big bug-eyed, wide kid. Stefan's just like low-browed and cool. And I'm thinking about, like Jaleel White, I don't know why he didn't act more, man. Like to do that dynamic, right? Like playing Steve Urkel, him being able to ball in real life, him being getting his cool, confident. I mean, maybe he's thinking about it, right? Maybe Jaleel White brought some of his own cool, calm, and confidence into Steve Urkel. He just made the voice different, right? He just made the voice. He had the suspenders, so it seemed a bit off-putting. But I really like. I love the different dynamics of um, the like when he built the machine that you can the what do you call what was the name of the machine that he used? Like initially he did the juice to become Stefan, then he built the machine and he was doing different characters. Um, there was the
Yeah, I know. I don't know the name of it. I'm checking it out.
uh,
Um,
there was the an episode in season 7 called Random Acts of Science, and this is like the funniest episode I've seen in a while. And it's when season 15, episode 7. It's Carl and Steve are at the police warehouse, and Carl's telling Steve, like Steve ends up moving in with the Winslows because his parents moved to Russia. They don't tell him. They just move and they move to Russia. They don't tell him. So he ends up moving in with the Winslows. So Steve is like doing his experiments in the house, and Carl's like no more. You can't do this anymore because like that the kitchen windows have been broken at least 10 times a season. So they're in a police warehouse, and this gang comes into the warehouse. They tie them up, and Steve's telling them about the machine. Like, like you guys can be bank robbers. You can jump into the machine, drink any potion, become anyone you want, change back, and the cops will never know who did it. So he has like he's like, let us try first. Let us try. We'll show you that it works, and then it's all yours. So he's going through the different juices and vials, and he's like, how about this? Why don't we do the Bruce juice? And they're like, Bruce who? And he's like, I don't know. Could be Bruce
Yep.
Springsteen. And he just different names all these different celebrities. So they go into the machine, and they come out like two Bruce Lees. And I'm like, yo, I totally
Yep.
forgot about that episode. So, yo, they're just fighting. They're just fighting. They're wrecking the entire crew. And again, it's watching Jalil White. Like he did a lot of the moves, the strikes, the fighting. Carl did it too. Carl's doing a lot of his moves too, except for like the jumping up the walls and the backflips. And again, it's watching again the dynamic shift and watching the skill in terms of this acting and being able to kind of shift through different characters. And it's dope. And that episode is also like I love the episodes where Carl and Steve work together, like the rare episodes when they're just like getting along and having fun, because so much of it is just the anger and the repetitive annoyance, which I get the comical relief, but seeing them being able to bond and actually like cultivate the relationship in these rare moments, I love those episodes, man. I do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking it up. It looks like he called it the transformation chamber.
Right.
That was one, and then another machine that was like a teleporter. It was the Urk pad.
I didn't
Looks
see
like,
that.
um, but
What season? Do you know what season
but
that shows up in?
transformation chamber sounds right. Let's see. It looks like nah. It doesn't say the season. Yeah, I don't see a season. But the
Okay,
transformation chamber sounds right. I'm pretty sure that's
right.
what he called the machine. But something you just said. Oh yeah. So Carl. The thing about Carl and Steve's dynamic is that Carl used to do things with Steve that normal adults would never do with kids. Like him and Steve would do like stakeouts. Like they would just do things that I'd be like, if my dad was a cop, he would never do those things with me. Like he'd be like no normal cop does those things.
Right. I keep forgetting that
But
he's a
like
kid. I keep
they
forgetting
just
that.
used to
You're
do
right,
this.
man. Right.
He's like at that point he was like a teenager and he was just doing things with Carl and I'm like, yo, this is crazy. Like what is this guy doing? Um, but you're right. They had a really dope dynamic, and he used to support. I feel like he used to do things with Carl. That was more like things that were a little more not dangerous, but things that required more intelligence than Eddie. Eddie just would get the short end, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um,
I feel like they had a.
yeah,
I'm just
Eddie never did those
realizing.
things with Carl.
Yeah, I'm realizing now why you say that. It feels like at times Steve and Carl may have had a better relationship than Carl and Eddie. I feel like Steve was, and maybe it's just my bias limited view because, like I said, I only watched a few episodes. But I think the episodes with Steve and Carl like working together, I think they were really, and maybe that's part of the show, right? Like Steve being like the outcast of his family and needing a secondary home. Eddie already knows he's Carl's son. That's solidified. He knows his dad loves him. So there is a need for Steve to kind of have those bonds and those moments with Carl because Steve never got that at home. Like there's an episode, season 5, episode 18, the Psycho Twins, where Carl and Steve are like wrestling. They're fighting. They're wrestling against the bushwhackers,
Yep,
and again, it's like this fun dynamic.
yep.
You see them laughing, having fun together. Eddie's in the audience with Waldo, uh, and I can't really remember off the top of my head any real episodes with Eddie and Carl doing things together outside of like trying to fix the house, like on the roof, or like the life lessons or the episode Good Cop Bad Cop in season 5 episode 15 when Eddie gets pulled over by those white cops and Carl rightfully defends his son. So interesting to think about that now. I like that flow through. I thought.
Yeah, it's just interesting how Steve. and Carl's relationship developed from the first couple of seasons where Carl's like, "Go home, Steve," or "Get out of here, Steve," to later on in the seasons where Steve was like Carl's right hand man, to an extent.
Right.
And then it looks like they introduced the transformation chamber in during season 5. So during the episode Dr. Urkel and Mr. Cool. So I guess that's
Right.
when
Right.
Stefan Urkel was first introduced. But yeah, that's when they introduced the transformation chamber. But
I
yeah,
thought it
I
was
think too that
I thought it was just the juice on
good.
itself first, because I remember him drinking the juice and he fell down behind the couch, got up, and then he was Stefan. I think the chamber came at season the same season, episode 20, excuse me, the last episode, episode 24. Stefan returns. Yeah, I think that's when the chamber came.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it on the fandom
The
Family
wiki.
Matters fandom page. It doesn't say it. It just
Okay.
says during during season 5 episode, and it gives me the episode, and it says this is when the then it says this is when it gives me a breakdown of when Steve became Stefan Urkel.
Right.
Um, actually, I'm wrong. It says when Steve returns. So whatever episode Steve returns, that's when the transformation chamber was
Stefan.
introduced. Yeah, he also invented. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, Stefan. So I guess that was what's
It's
the
season
last episode in season
yeah,
2 or 3.
the one where I think you said he was talking to Maxine in the beginning and telling her that she was saying how she's
Yeah,
always alone. So yeah, that was it.
yeah. So I'm looking on the page. It doesn't say the episode number. It just says the name. So in Stefan returns, which was the last episode in season 2, that's when he created the boss juice,
Right.
and I'm sorry, boss sauce and transformation chamber. That's when he used it. So and who comes up with these names, right? But that's a whole nother thing. Um, but how do you feel? Looking at it now, obviously we're reflecting on it, but how do you feel once again? Steve and Carl's dynamic plays a role in the culture, plays a role in where we are now. Um, Steve was in some ways like an adopted son,
Right.
so or an adopted family member. Um, So I guess what are your thoughts on how it would be now in today's society?
Um, I don't know. There's a like I don't know, right? I feel like we've gone left in terms of this kind of accepting. I feel like we talked about this in the first episode, right? Where you brought up the title and significance of family matters, and we talked about Steve is kind of being indoctrinated into family, and we talked about just accepting the non traditional definition um, I guess introduction of new people into the family. Um, I don't know. I don't know, man. I think like I never really, like I said, I never considered the age aspect. Like Steve was a teen, right, doing stakeouts and all this other stuff with a 10 year, what how many year veteran Carl was throughout the show. So I think on one aspect, people wouldn't be feeling it, right? Like he's just a kid. Like there's a I think now we live in a culture where people want to impose and limit maybe people's experiences. Like thinking about the show, thinking about the experiences, the stakeouts, like really just thinking about that, and all the other dynamics that allowed Carl, excuse me, to work with Steve in these non-traditional settings that a teen or a young adult shouldn't be in. I think they add on to Steve's confidence, his experiences with life, and they're probably illegal, so in some capacity, but they're important. Like I'm thinking about when he made the Robo Urkel, right? Remember when he made Robo Urkel, and then
Yeah,
Robo Urkel, I think, joined the
I
police
do.
force, right? But now I don't think it would fly. I don't think it would fly. I think people would be like, "You're putting him in danger. You can't do that, right?" Like there's too much judgment and uh, too much limitations on what people can or can't do. I don't know. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
have a
well,
solid answer. Yeah.
No, I think your answer is spot on. We live in a society now where you're watched, under a microscope, especially with the age of social media. So, if Steve was putting out a lot of what he does or Carl does together on social media, I could just see it either being really accepted or it being really shunned. But there would
Right.
be no in between.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Just understanding that the those times back in the '90s, there were just different things that uh, life was different. They were doing things differently when it comes to what was on TV. Um, and I know you and I want to kind of jump in before we end it, jump into some of the reviews of what people kind of said about the show, what people were saying about the shows, maybe even what critics were saying about the show back in those times, because I know how people looked at it then and how people look at it now is obviously totally different.
Right.
So,
Right. You want to do that
jumping into
now?
those reviews and seeing what, yeah, I think we should jump into them and see kind of what people were saying about the show, maybe from season one to season two, and maybe one review from each season,
All right.
um, because I think that also plays a huge role in kind of how the show was perceived year over year, or season over season, or quarter over quarter. So, um,
I'll pull that up
so yeah,
now, but real quick, I guess before we transition, how did you feel about Harriet's development
yeah.
and her relationships? I feel like she doesn't get enough attention, or I don't feel like she gets not enough of the acknowledgement that she deserves. So, wanted to get your perspective on her character, her development, how she interacted with her children, and yeah, just like kind of being the foundation of the family.
Yeah, I really don't feel like Harriet had much development. I feel like when things were bad, she was the rock in the family. So people would go to her and talk to her, right? So Eddie would go talk to her, Laura would go talk to her. Uh, I feel like Carl, because Carl was always whining, he whines 90% of the time. Like every single season, he's whining about something. She used to always kind of be the one to be the glue and be like, and be the rationale behind it and be like, yo, this is why we should do this. Or this is
Right.
why this makes sense. And this is why the family needs this. And this is why I do that. So I don't think she had so much character development. I think it was more so she she was put in certain situations to eradicate maybe something negative happening, or maybe something that started out as a mess, and she helped clean it up with her savvy. um and what another good thing that I'm glad you asked about Harriet is Harry and Carl always had these weird episodes in different seasons about them seeing other people, like being attracted to other people. Harriet would be attracted to a guy, or Carl would be attracted to a woman, and they would always obviously come back together. And that's something you and I established last episode, where at the
Right.
end of every episode, the family always came back together.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
but that was always also funny to me too, how Harriet would have these episodes where she would find a man attractive, but she's like, I love Carl, and Carl had this episode where
Right.
he finds a woman attractive, and so that's another thing I think kind of fit with who Harriet was and her character
Yeah.
as well.
I feel like we don't really get that in outside, maybe outside of reality. Like I said, I don't. Again, this is just me, my assumptions. I don't feel like you really get that in modern shows. Like in the past, a lot of this, there's always these dynamics where men are placed in situations. Like in season one, the episode where Carl has a new partner. Like going back to what we talking about, why Harriet wasn't a female cop and thinking that they didn't want to portray that. But in season one, Carl gets a female partner, and she's like this young, attractive woman, and Harriet's worried that she's cheating on him. But in no sense, in no aspect, right? As many times as you have these, like you said, these levels of attraction, I feel like shows in the '90s never crossed that boundary where people cross the line. There's always, like you said, family. They always stick to the core because that's what it's supposed to be, and the that's what it needs to be at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, you missed the part there, because I think that's a great episode to reference, because it wasn't Harriet, it was Rachel, and it was Mother Winslow. They kept basically, I literally wrote
Oh,
down
he
in my
putting the
notes.
battery in that back. Yeah, you're right.
Rachel is an instigator. She instigates everything.
That's why they got her out of the house. They said, "Get the heck out of here."
Everything. She always instigated. So in that episode, Harriet continues to say, she's like, I trust my husband. My husband, he's good. I don't have any problems with my husband. And Rachel's like, well, you know, they find a hotel key or they find something in it, and it becomes this thing where
Right,
she's being they're instigating it. So then her and Mother Winslow and Harriet, they go and they end up messing with Carl's bus and his thing that he's trying to do and being a
right,
part of
right,
that.
right.
Uh, so yeah, I think Harriet was always the logical one. She, you know what? I gotta say it. Harriet was a black mother. Like black women, that's she represented black women to the highest.
Yeah, yeah,
She was someone who, as a kid growing up, I would be honored to have that as my mom,
right.
and my mom was definitely similar. But she was a black woman, like holding down the fort. And I'm glad you asked about it because you're right. She didn't get the credit she deserves, and we giving you your flowers, Harriet.
All right, let's jump into these reviews, man. So, any, I'm thinking maybe we both pull from. Are you doing IMDb reviews?
Yeah, we could pull from IMDb wherever. I definitely want to use the same look at the same one you're looking at. So if you
All right.
drop it here in the chat, I'll pull it up.
And you want to do user reviews or like what's I guess
I
professional reviews or whatever.
Yeah, I think what do you think? I think user reviews works.
All right, cool, cool.
What were people saying? Like obviously the critics are going to be the critics, but what are people saying?
All right.
Um,
And I want to pull from like old reviews, also if that's even possible. Let me see.
yeah,
Uh,
let's take a
so I'm
look.
gonna start with 1-star reviews. I'm interested in people's who don't like this at all.
Yeah, why didn't people like it? I would love
So
to hear that.
there's one in IMDb, 1 out of 10. Someone posted this in 2017. John Six Daniels starts great with season 1 and season 2. Season 3 comes around and the family that is supposed to matter is pushed aside for Urkel to take over. As a child watching this show, it was awesome. As a mature adult, the show is stupid. The character development and involvement was terrible, all to allow some nerd to even focus. I couldn't even finish season 3 on how stupid most episodes were. You begin an episode, by the middle, nothing with a purpose happens. By the end, you realize the show is over before anything ever happens. Urkel killed this show. I feel bad that Judy didn't get any development. Laura was fine being a girl discovering herself until Urkel became her only storyline. Harriet, by season 3, became the cliche loud, obnoxious black woman. Carl
Hmm.
became the cliche stupid dad by season 3. In seasons 1 and 2, he was a very involved, organized father. Grandma Winslow was great. I liked Rachel, Eddie, and then Richie took Judy's role. Urkel saved the show ratings wise, but he killed a show that could have been better than it was. I respect how Urkel was a sensation in the 90s. However, he is no Kramer, invasive neighbor. Kramer innovated himself after every season. Urkel was just purely toxic to the show. Damn.
All right, so we don't need to read anymore. I think we can unpack this one. let,
Yo.
us unpack that. So I think that person actually said a lot of what we agreed on. Um, it was some of it is super harsh, but uh, I definitely agree with
I
some
don't
of
agree. I don't agree with his points.
some of them. I do like I definitely feel bad that Judy didn't get any development. I agree with him there. Mother Winslow is great. Carl he was always looked at as a stupid dad to me almost every season um, until later on in the series. And obviously, after just talking about how much Harriet deserves her flowers, I disagreed about with what he was saying about Harriet.
Right.
Um, and I don't know what he meant, like when he talked about Richie took over Judy's role, because Judy and Richie didn't really have roles. They had like little segments here and there, but I
Right.
don't really
Right.
think they
Right.
had roles. But um, I 100% disagree with him about Steve. Like Urkel is a Kramer. Um, and this person's out of his
Probably
mind
the
saying, not
original
saying
Kramer, right?
it.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, he's out of his mind. Urkel's no Kramer. What? Like, did he not see those 9 seasons? Season one had a little bit of Urkel, and season nine had all Urkel. To me, that sounds like character development at its finest.
Right, right, right.
So I definitely disagree with that. But wow, that was intense.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think some of the language that he uses is what's really kind of throwing me off. Like, so he said Carl was cliche stupid dad by season three, and one and two he was very involved, and I think that's kind of the earlier point we made with Carl, the show being really wrapped around Carl and Steve's relationship, and Carl kind of being a surrogate or a stepfather to Steve. And I don't see it as a negative thing. Again, if if you consider Steve being part of the family, it's no longer this oddball just intruding. Steve adds value to the connection, adds value to their growth, and he's become part of the family. So his dynamic, he needs it. I think Steve needs it. He needs the that extra additional balance that he from a male role model that he isn't getting from home, and Carl provides that. I mean, that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah.
Obnoxious
Uh,
black woman. I don't see that. I feel like Harriet's character. Sorry, go ahead. I'll jump back in.
no, I was gonna say, just to piggyback off what you're saying about an obnoxious black woman. I'm willing to bet, and obviously we'll never know, but somebody that isn't black said wrote that review.
No, no, that's the first thing I thought. That's what I thought, man. That's what I thought too.
Harriet, you were not obnoxious. You were incredible. Thank you. Like, for the culture coming from us. Thank you. You were like, she was great. She was exactly what she needed to be. So anybody who hates on her, come see me. Stop.
I'm
uh,
looking at the other reviews too to kind of get a feel for who they are. So,
yeah. So I pulled up the a 10-star review since you started with a 1 star. I pulled up a 10-star review.
all right,
Um, And the one that stood out to me, I'll just start with one from the top. So this is from Curtis Taylor Johnson. It says, at its peak in the first 4 seasons, and the person said, this is a very enjoyable show when the character of Steve Urkel played more of a supporting role. Once they writers, I guess it was once the writers started to make him the star of the show, is when it's went down when its downfall. I don't know. The show worked much better when the cast was more of an ensemble. Um, were no were no and I think the issue is people can't write. So I'm just gonna skip some of this. The storyline also became more and more outrageous to the point that the show wasn't even watchable. The best episodes were between 1989 and 1993, although there were small numbers of episodes after this that were entertainment. It ran longer than it should have because the writers ran out of things for Urkel to do and grew increasingly repetitive with each season.
right,
I mean, this was a 10-star review.
right. I
So,
don't. I feel like a 5-star review. They don't know if they like it or not.
exactly. But the reason I read it is because, uh, for whatever reason, people feel a way about Urkel, right? Like, either you love him or you hate him. This person gave them a 10-star review. Maybe he did it by accident here. Maybe it was by accident. But there was just this hate on Urkel, right? Which I don't get. And then I'll let you respond in a second. I just want to read another one because there's a contrast here. So this is another 10-star review. Um, and this one says best show ever. I'm not even gonna pronounce the name because it's something weird. But the review says, I love this show from beginning to end. I know a lot of people know this, but Steve Urkel is just a 10 out of 10. Honestly, no TV show or movie have ever made me laugh this much. A lot of the other cast members are hilarious, but no one can be better. Not even one. Every time Steve appears, it's it's time for me to just know that things are about to get funny. I love this show. The actors are great. The episodes are awesome. A perfect show. a perfect cast. This show is the real deal. Honestly, I never loved a show more than this. A straight 10 out of 10. Um, and that's either you love Steve or you don't. So
Right.
yeah, what what do you think?
So I think for the first one, right, I guess a lot of the reviews, I mean, and maybe if you read a couple more, the perspective, I think people haven't shifted their perspective, right? So again, I think we really got into what the show is about, is that family matters and Steve is part of the family. And once you accept that Steve is part of the family, you don't see him as an outsider invading the show or being this oddball who's just intruding, right? Like he's not Kramer, right? Kramer is just an intruder who pops up randomly. Kramer isn't, and I guess this goes back to the first review. You know, he's an oddball. He's fun. He's quirky. He's unique, but he isn't a dynamic, right? The show's about Seinfeld and his friends. But in Family Matters, you have to accept that Steve is part of the family. You have to accept that there is no uh that yeah, you have to accept that he's part of the family and that he's not just an intruder just coming to cause chaos and division. Um, it does become outrageous. It does become repetitive. Like I watched the 2-part series when they went to Disney World at the end of I think season 6, and Steve like wins that contest for the transformation chamber.
Yep.
And yeah, it's it's the same thing with or Steve. Stefan is back and he wants to propose. He proposes to Laura. They want to get married. Then Myra comes, and it's this whole back and forth thing. And we've seen the dynamic. We've seen it over and over again. And yeah, by season 6, they shot their load, and it became repetitive and excessive. But I think that once people just once you stop viewing Steve as an outsider and accept him as just part of the show, um, I guess from the beginning that you see that he is crucial to the development of other characters, and he is a bit of a staple, right? He brings the family together. Yeah, he annoys them, but he brings them together. He brings additional life to their could be boring life, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and I think the people that are leaving these reviews, their their points are valid. They're valid points. It's what they seen as they watch the show. So I do agree that the show, as you just stated, I'm not going to repeat everything you said, but I agree with everything you said. Like it became something that we kind of knew what was going to happen. We knew Laura was going to end up with Steve. You know, we knew Eddie was sooner or later mature. Like we knew
right,
it. Just he couldn't be the teenage Eddie. The whole
right,
season.
right, right,
So
right,
or the whole series. So these things were happening that we kind of knew were going to happen, but it just I remember tuning in because I wanted to see how it was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen,
right,
but just how is it going to develop? And that's what real fans of the show and people that love the show, I feel got from it. So um,
right.
so yeah.
Like I think people like I get not seeing the character development because the show transitions and this being comedy based and it always just feels like Steve is it's the same thing I said. Like I said, Steve he's annoying. You apologize, things work out. That's every show. That's what sitcoms are. That's the foundation for every show. Every single show is it's the same formula, right? Like TV media has a formula where it's always gonna be the same thing. It's just new, unique dynamics. And yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of episodes that is filler and boring and don't add value to the overall story, but they're not supposed to be they're not a it's not a series, right? Like every episode is a standalone for the most part, unless it's a 2-part episode, or unless they're bringing in a concept back from a previous episode, but it's not a continuation. And I mean, I see the growth, I see the development, I see the maturity. Like you watch them grow as people, you watch them grow as adults, and although they have some of the same founded character. Um, I guess it's a character foundations, you see them get more responsibility. Like there's an episode, season, I think season 4, episode 25, Bud and Buns, when they need extra money And I guess they were broke throughout the whole show. I guess so, right? They need extra money, and Carl works at the burger joint or the hot dog joint with Eddie, and Eddie gets promoted, and Eddie's Carl's manager. So seeing Eddie used to be this slacker, this dumb jock who can't get things done, but now you see Eddie in this managerial role, and he's sonning his dad at work essentially, right? And I think that's important. It's important to show the growth. It's important to give them responsibility. They and it's a good transition because Carl's only going to work there for a few weeks. They need extra money. The manager is like, hey, I just got promoted to district manager, so I need a new manager. And he's like, Carl, you've been great. You've been on time. You've done everything you needed to do. And Carl's like, I'm going to get promoted. But he's like, no, but you're leaving in 3 weeks. So Eddie, you get the promotion. You're the new manager. And it's fair. It's what it's supposed to be, right? Carl thinks just because he's older, he's wiser, he's going to get promoted. Like, no, it's not better for business. Your experience is great, but it's not better for the overall business. You want someone who's going to be here long term. You want someone who's going to grow with the company. And Eddie rightfully deserves that. That's character development, right? It ends funny, right? Because Carl is just pissed off at Eddie, just telling him to do all these menial tasks. And when they come home, like Eddie isn't even like thinking about work. He's like, we're home, dad. Like that was a great day, blah blah blah. And Carl's resentful, right? Like that's because that's what Carl is. Like you said, Carl is
He's
whiny. He's
whining.
resentful, and he's like, well, I'm the dad of this house, and you're gonna be cleaning, all weekend long and stuff like that. And it's corny. It's corny, and that's what it is, right? Like as a man, yeah, and as a father, you're gonna feel a way about your son getting a promotion over you initially, but you gain perspective. And that's the point of the show, right? To have these initial feelings, to be upset, to maybe be resentful, but you gain perspective and you change the dynamic and you communicate and you make things work because again, family matters, and this is what you have. You got to work with it. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's once again, looking at the character development and how Eddie had to mature over the seasons. Um, and I actually think it's a great place for us to leave it. Right, we've seen this show create so much, uh, create so much of a dynamic of what Family Matters is all about. Like what the title Family Matters is all about, and we see it from all different perspectives. And I think looking back at it and watching these episodes closer because of this podcast, I'm just so blessed that I was one of those kids who tuned into TGI Friday because I'm pretty sure it was on TGI Friday uh, to watch this. I just was really into it. So um, yeah, I'm glad this is the first episode, the first show that we did, and this is how we started the podcast. And this conversation has been great, bro. I'm blown away by what we've discovered, and really really looking forward to
yeah.
what's next. So,
It's
what is next?
I guess real quick. It's been interesting to kind of just make these new connections, and although like we watch it independently, and certain words just pop out, and we just kind of make these connections. So what's the modern day or the possibilities of what it is. Um, so we did seasons 2 through 8. Next up for us is doing our clubhouse, and we'll finalize that between us, and we'll probably post it. We'll definitely post it on social media in the next few days. And on the clubhouse, we'll be discussing the final season, season 9. We'll be watching the cast reunion that came out a few years ago, and just kind of hopefully have some people on board who are willing to ask questions or gain or add their perspective on the show, what it's meant to them, and maybe take apart some of the things we've said or challenge some of the ideas that we've had in the show, what it means, and character development and its significance in terms of the overall Black experience and where we've kind of grown watching it as kids. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I would definitely say, we encourage you, whoever you are listening to this, to go back and watch the seasons. And obviously you don't have to watch all 9 seasons, but go through the I know on Hulu they have the episode description, so you can just read a description. If it stands out to you, watch the episode, and I think that's a good way to start. And it'll give you an idea of why we love the show, and why we decided to have this conversation about it. And you know, as you listen to our podcast, please share your thoughts. Let us know what you're thinking, because I think the growth of anything is something that is important to connect with community. So, we want to create connection, we want to create community, and I think that's something that we want to keep in mind as we continue to build this. So, hopefully, you can join us on Clubhouse and continue to rock with us.
Absolutely. And we'll also do our final reviews. We read some of the reviews and we'll give our final reviews for the show on the Clubhouse also.
Cool beans. All right, let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining us on this episode of the. Thanks for joining us on Nothing Moves Without Us, a Black Culture podcast. I'm your host, Clifford.
And I'm Thomas, aka Young Raspy. Harriet, I love you, baby. I love you, Harriet. Laura, I love that short hair you got.
You can find me on IG. You can find the Nothing Moves Without Us podcast on IG at A Black Culture Podcast. You can find me on IG at Goats Conditioning and Black Excellence Daily.
And I'm under the Connection Curator on IG. And yeah, we appreciate you guys.
All right. Till next time. Peace.